My name is Elena, and at 22, I never thought I'd be sleeping in my car while juggling 2 jobs to pay for college. The college fund my father left for me had mysteriously vanished while my stepmother and her children lived comfortably in what used to be my family home. Then my wealthy Uncle Marcus found me working at a diner, exhausted and barely surviving. What happened next changed everything. I grew up in a warm, loving home in suburban Chicago. My father, Robert, owned a successful accounting firm that he'd built from nothing. Despite his long work hours, he always made time for our Saturday morning fishing trips and Sunday pancake breakfasts. My mother, Sarah, was a kindergarten teacher who filled our house with laughter, homemade cookies, and bedtime stories that sparked my imagination. We lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom house with a garden my mother tended lovingly. My room was painted mint green, my favorite color, and Dad had built me bookshelves that reached the ceiling. Every birthday, they'd surprise me with a themed party based on whatever book series I was obsessed with that year. My father had an older brother, Marcus, who was incredibly successful in commercial real estate. Uncle Marcus lived in a mansion across town and traveled internationally for business deals. Despite their different lifestyles, the brothers were close, meeting for lunch every Tuesday without fail. Since Uncle Marcus never married or had children, he spoiled me as his only niece. For my 8th birthday, he took our entire family to Europe, a trip that remains one of my most treasured memories. Family gatherings were magical. Thanksgiving at our house, Christmas at Uncle Marcus's estate. Mom would spend days preparing elaborate meals, and Uncle Marcus's holiday parties were elegant affairs with towering Christmas trees and gifts for everyone. I felt surrounded by love and security, never imagining how quickly that could change. What I didn't know was that Dad had been carefully planning for my future since I was born. He'd established a substantial education trust fund, adding to it monthly even when money was tight. The fund was large enough to cover undergraduate and graduate school at any university I could get into. Dad often told me, "Education is the one thing no one can ever take from you, Elena." Everything changed when I was 13. Mom began experiencing severe headaches and memory lapses. After weeks of tests, doctors delivered devastating news: an aggressive brain tumor. They gave her 6 months. She fought for 10. Those 10 months transformed our happy home into a place of hushed conversations, medical equipment, and visiting nurses. Despite insurance, medical bills piled up quickly. Dad worked overtime to cover expenses while caring for Mom and me. I'd often find him on late-night phone calls with insurance companies or the hospital billing department. I grew up fast. During Mom's illness, while other 13-year-olds worried about middle school drama, I was learning to administer medications, help Mom with basic needs, and keep our household running. Dad taught me to cook simple meals and manage household tasks. We became a team, united in our love for Mom. Mom died on a beautiful spring morning when her garden was just beginning to bloom. The funeral was held on a perfect day with blue skies and flowering trees, which somehow made our grief feel sharper. Uncle Marcus stood beside us at the graveside, his hand on Dad's shoulder, both men looking aged beyond their years. The months after Mom's death were a blur of sorrow. Dad threw himself into work while I focused on school, knowing it would make both parents proud. Uncle Marcus became more distant during this period, and I later learned he disagreed with some of Dad's medical decisions, creating tension between the brothers. Despite our grief, Dad and I found a new routine. We kept some of Mom's traditions alive while creating new ones. I excelled academically, and Dad continued contributing to my education fund even during our financially strained time. 2 years after Mom's death, Dad met Victoria at a business conference. She worked in marketing and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After seeing Dad lonely and withdrawn for so long, it was wonderful to see him smile again. Victoria had 2 children from her previous marriage, Ryan, who was 19, and studying business, and Chloe, who was 17 and artistically talented. When we first met for dinner, everyone was polite and friendly. Ryan asked Dad about his business, Chloe complimented my necklace, and Victoria made sure everyone felt included. I thought we might actually become a real family. 6 months later, Dad and Victoria married in a small ceremony. Victoria moved into our house with her children, and suddenly our quiet home was busy and full again. Ryan took the guest room while Chloe moved into Dad's converted office. The changes started subtly. When Dad was around, Victoria was warm and inclusive, asking about my day and including me in family discussions. But when Dad was at work, her demeanor shifted noticeably. Her smiles became forced, her questions felt more like interrogations, and she began comparing me unfavorably to Chloe. Ryan and Chloe picked up on their mother's cues. They weren't overtly cruel, just increasingly dismissive. They'd make plans without including me, share inside jokes I wasn't part of, and gradually rearrange our living space to favor their preferences. Photos of my mother began disappearing from common areas. When I asked about them, Victoria explained, they'd been carefully stored away because dwelling on the past isn't healthy. Our holiday traditions were replaced with Victoria's and Mom's recipes were forgotten in favor of new ones. Dad was working longer hours than ever, encouraged by Victoria, who praised his work ethic and ambition. "You handle business, honey," she'd say. "I'll take care of everything at home." And she did reshape our home to her liking while Dad was absent. Money became a frequent topic between them. I'd overhear Victoria discussing business expenses, mentioning costs for the children's activities or noting that Ryan needs a car for his senior year. Dad would agree to whatever she suggested, grateful for her interest in family finances. Meanwhile, my own needs became less of a priority. When I needed money for a school trip, Victoria questioned whether it was necessary. "College is expensive, Elena. We need to save every penny." This despite knowing about my education fund, which Dad had mentioned was specifically for such expenses. The distance between Dad and me grew wider. Victoria was skilled at creating small conflicts, then positioning herself as the peacemaker. "Elena's at that difficult teenage age," she'd tell Dad. "All kids go through rebellious phases." She made my normal teenage behavior seem hurtful to our new family dynamic. About a year after the marriage, Dad's business began showing signs of trouble. He'd bring work home, spending evenings surrounded by paperwork with worried expressions. Victoria would massage his shoulders and assure him she was there to help. She began accompanying him to business meetings and client dinners. By my junior year of high school, I felt like a guest in my own home. My bedroom had been partially converted to accommodate Chloe's art supplies. "Your room has the best light," Victoria explained. "You girls should share anyway." Family conversations revolved around Ryan's college plans and Chloe's art shows. My achievements were acknowledged but quickly overshadowed. The call came on a Thursday afternoon during chemistry class. The principal's somber face told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. Dad had been driving to a client meeting when a drunk driver ran a red light, hitting his car head-on. He died instantly. Victoria was already at the hospital when I arrived, Ryan and Chloe beside her, speaking with doctors about organ donation and funeral arrangements. When she saw me, she nodded briefly before turning back to the official conversations. Uncle Marcus appeared later, looking shocked and older. He hugged me tightly, whispering condolences, but Victoria quickly intercepted him for a private conversation. Victoria took charge of all funeral arrangements, rarely consulting me. The service was held at a church Dad never attended, with a minister who'd never met him. Victoria delivered a tearful speech about their brief but passionate marriage, positioning herself and her children as the primary grieving family. 3 days after the funeral, we met with Dad's lawyer. Dad had updated his will after marrying Victoria. The business was left to her with the understanding it would eventually come to me. The house was also hers, with a provision that I could live there until college graduation. Most importantly, my education trust remained intact, but with Victoria named as trustee until I turned 25. The lawyer explained the fund was substantial enough to cover elite university education plus graduate school. There was also a separate inheritance waiting for me at 25. Victoria nodded approvingly throughout the meeting, occasionally squeezing my hand possessively. The change in Victoria was immediate once the legal matters were settled. That evening, she called a family meeting. Ryan and Chloe sat beside her on the sofa, while I sat alone in Dad's old chair. "Now that the formalities are behind us, we need to discuss practical arrangements," Victoria began. "Elena, you'll be moving to the smaller bedroom upstairs. Ryan needs your room since he's transferring to a local college and needs space for his workout equipment." When I protested, Victoria's expression hardened. "This house belongs to me now, and I'll decide how space is used. Your father would want what's best for everyone, not just you." That night, my belongings were moved to the converted attic room with sloped ceilings and poor heating. Many of my things mysteriously didn't make the transition, including keepsakes from my mother and photos of our original family. Within weeks, all visible traces of my parents' life together had vanished. Family photos were replaced with new ones featuring Victoria, her children, and occasionally my father from their brief marriage. It was as if my mother had never existed. Victoria took control of all my expenses, demanding receipts and justification for everything. As trustee, I have fiduciary responsibility, she'd remind me. Your father trusted me to make wise decisions. Basic necessities became luxuries I had to justify. While Ryan received a new car and Chloe attended expensive art programs, I spent my senior year focused on escape. I joined every club and study group possible to avoid going home. I found part-time work at a bookstore, saving every dollar in a secret account. I studied intensely, knowing scholarships would give me independence from Victoria's control. My acceptance to Northwestern University should have been pure joy. When I shared the news with Victoria, she barely glanced at the letter. Northwestern is very expensive, she said. I'm not sure your trust can cover that. Perhaps community college first. I reminded her that Dad had specifically saved for my education at a good university. Victoria reluctantly agreed but made clear every expense would be scrutinized. The first 2 years at Northwestern were a respite from Victoria's toxicity. I lived in a dorm with my roommate Jessica, who became a close friend. The cramped space felt like paradise compared to Victoria's house. I threw myself into studies and campus activities, limiting home visits to major holidays only. Everything changed during junior year. Victoria called me to the house for an important financial discussion. Seated at the dining table with spreadsheets, she explained the family business was struggling. The economy has hit us hard, she said, though I'd read that accounting firms were actually doing well. We need to make difficult decisions about expenses. The difficult decision was dramatically reducing my educational funding. Victoria claimed the trust had underperformed and they needed to reallocate resources. Temporarily, my tuition would be covered, but housing, books, and living expenses were now my responsibility. When I asked to see account statements, Victoria became defensive. I don't appreciate your lack of trust, Elena. Your father appointed me trustee because he knew I'd make responsible decisions. Desperate, I consulted a legal aid office at university. The student lawyer explained that challenging a trustee required evidence of mismanagement and resources I didn't have. Without access to financial records, there was little I could do. I picked up additional work hours and found a second job waiting tables. My grades suffered as I balanced work and studies, but I was determined to complete my degree. I cut every possible expense, eating most meals at work and buying used textbooks. When summer came, I had no choice but to return to Victoria's house temporarily. What I found shocked me. My bedroom had been completely converted into a home gym with expensive equipment. My remaining possessions were boxed in the garage, many damaged or missing. You're hardly ever here, Victoria said dismissively when I protested. It made no sense to keep a room empty when Ryan needs workout space. You can sleep on the couch while visiting. That evening, I overheard a conversation between Victoria and Ryan in the kitchen. They didn't realize I was nearby sorting through damaged boxes in the garage. The trust fund has been a lifesaver, Victoria was saying. Without it, we'd have lost the business last year. How much longer can we keep using it? Ryan asked. Until she turns 25 or graduates. I've been careful, moving small amounts at a time. By the time she could challenge anything, the money will be fully integrated into the business. What if she figures it out? She has no proof and no resources to fight us. Her father was meticulous about paperwork. Everything looks legitimate investments that didn't perform as expected. I felt physically ill hearing their conversation. They were systematically stealing my inheritance while I struggled to survive. That night, sleeping on the uncomfortable couch, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Victoria directly. I'd find a way to support myself completely and document everything for when I had resources to fight back. The next morning, I told Victoria I'd found summer housing with friends in Chicago. It was a lie, but I needed to escape. I packed what little I could salvage and drove back to the city with no plan except survival. My first night sleeping in my car, parked in a Walmart lot, was terrifying. I'd arranged my few possessions in the back seat and trunk, creating a small sleeping space in the reclined driver's seat. My Honda Civic became my only home. I signed up for a gym membership for $30 a month, giving me access to showers, and restrooms. I found work at a diner that opened at a.m., and the early shift suited my new schedule. For evenings, I worked at a retail store. Between both jobs, I was working 70 hours a week. The physical toll was immense. My back ached from sleeping in the car. Summer heat made sleep nearly impossible. I kept windows cracked for air but worried about security. I developed systems for everything, organizing clothes in space-saving bags, using a cooler for perishables, doing laundry weekly while studying. The library became my sanctuary during free hours. Air-conditioned, quiet, and free, it provided a place to study and simply exist in comfort. I'd arrive when it opened and often stay until closing. As autumn arrived, new challenges emerged. I invested in a sleeping bag rated for cold temperatures and layered clothing at night. On the coldest nights, I'd splurge on a cheap motel room. I maintained my appearance meticulously, knowing that looking disheveled might raise questions. To classmates and coworkers, I was just another hard-working student. No one suspected that. After my shifts ended, I had no home to return to. I'd been living this double life for 3 months when Uncle Marcus walked into the diner. I was working the morning shift, hair neatly pulled back, uniform crisp despite being maintained in gym bathrooms, when a familiar voice ordered black coffee. Looking up, I froze. Uncle Marcus stood before me, older and grayer than I remembered, but unmistakable. He seemed equally surprised. "Elena, is that you?" I nodded, suddenly conscious of how thin I'd become despite my efforts to appear normal. "Hello, Uncle Marcus. It's been a while." He waited until my coworker could cover for me, then motioned me to a corner booth. "What are you doing working here? I thought you'd be focused on studies. Victoria mentioned you were doing well at Northwestern." Perhaps it was genuine concern in his voice, or accumulated stress from months of pretending, but something in me broke. Tears filled my eyes as I quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I get off at 2, I said quietly. "Could we talk then?" Those 4 hours felt like the longest of my life. When my shift ended, Uncle Marcus was waiting in his luxury car. Over lunch, at a quiet cafe, the whole story poured out. Victoria's takeover after Dad died, her control of my trust fund, the conversion of my bedroom, the overheard conversation about using my money to save the business, my current situation living in my car while working 2 jobs. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each detail. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. I had no idea. He finally said, voice tight with anger, "I knew Victoria and I had our differences, but I never imagined she'd do this to David's daughter." He shook his head. "I should have stayed more involved after your father died." He reached across and took my hand. "This ends today, Elena. No niece of mine is living in her car while that woman steals her inheritance. Come with me right now." Marcus's reaction was immediate and decisive. After seeing my car set up, his face grew grimmer. "Pack whatever you need. You're coming to my house immediately." I hesitated, pride warring with desperate need. "I don't want to be a burden." "Your family, Elena. The only family I have left. Your father would be heartbroken seeing you like this. Please let me help." That night, I slept in a real bed for the first time in months. Marcus gave me a guest suite with my own bathroom and fresh towels. The luxury was overwhelming after months of deprivation. Over breakfast, Marcus outlined his plan. "I've already called my attorney. We're meeting him at 10. I want you to tell him exactly what you told me." Marcus's attorney, Mr. Patterson, was sharp-featured with piercing eyes. He listened intently as I recounted everything, taking detailed notes. "Based on what you've described," he said when I finished, "we have strong grounds to petition for Victoria's removal as trustee. Converting trust assets for personal use is serious breach of fiduciary duty." The investigation moved quickly. Mr. Patterson obtained court orders for all records related to my trust and the family business. Marcus insisted I focus on studies while they handled legal aspects, offering me a home for as long as needed. 2 weeks later, Mr. Patterson called us for a meeting. Financial statements and bank records covered his desk. "We found it," he said without preamble. Over 3 years, Victoria systematically diverted funds from Elena's trust into the family business. The transfers were disguised as investments, but there were never formal agreements. The business has been operating at a loss for years, with Victoria using the trust as a personal slush fund. Nearly $180,000 had been diverted from my education trust, leaving less than a third of what should have been available. Victoria had also been paying herself excessive trustee fees and using trust assets for personal expenses. This goes beyond civil violations, Mr. Patterson continued. There's enough evidence for criminal charges. The question is how you want to proceed. I thought about sleeping in my car through heat and cold while they lived comfortably on money Dad had saved for my future. Both, I said firmly. I want both criminal and civil action. The confrontation in Mr. Patterson's office was swift. Victoria arrived with her attorney, maintaining composure until Mr. Patterson began presenting evidence methodically. Her facade cracked as the full scope of her theft became clear. These were legitimate business investments, she insisted. David would have wanted the company preserved. Then why were the transfers concealed? Mr. Patterson countered. Why? Were personal expenses for Ryan and Chloe paid from trust assets? I found my voice. It wasn't just sitting there. It was my future, meant for my education, not for saving a failing business or buying Ryan a car. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You were always so entitled, Elena. Always expecting special treatment. Marcus, who had been silent, finally spoke. The business was failing because of your mismanagement, not Elena. David built a profitable company that you ran into the ground, then stole from his daughter to cover your mistakes. The meeting ended with Victoria facing two choices: agree to settlement terms, including immediate removal as trustee, full restitution, and resignation from the business, or face both civil and criminal proceedings. Her attorney pulled her aside for private consultation before she grudgingly agreed to settlement terms. The legal process took several weeks, but results were comprehensive. Victoria was removed as trustee with Marcus appointed in her place. The court ordered full restitution plus interest. Victoria was forced to sell her business ownership to pay the judgment. Despite the settlement, criminal charges proceeded independently. Victoria eventually accepted a plea deal including probation and community service, with a permanent record preventing her from serving as trustee in the future. Throughout this process, Marcus supported me completely, as we spent time together. He shared insights about my father I'd never known. They'd grown apart after Mom's death, partly because Marcus had disapproved of Victoria from the beginning. I saw through her immediately, he admitted. But David was vulnerable after Sarah died. When I tried to warn him, it only created distance between us. These conversations helped me understand the complex family dynamics and created a new bond between us. The restoration of my trust fund meant I could complete education without worry. I moved into a comfortable apartment near campus and slowly began feeling secure again. The family business, under professional management, began recovering once freed from Victoria's mishandling. Rebuilding after months of homelessness wasn't overnight. Even with financial security restored, psychological impacts lingered. I'd wake in panic, momentarily expecting to find myself in my car. Marcus gently suggested therapy, and with his encouragement, I began seeing Dr. Rivera, who specialized in family trauma. You survived an incredibly difficult situation, she reminded me. The coping mechanisms that helped you then may not serve you now, but they were valuable when you needed them. Slowly, with professional guidance and Marcus's support, I began healing. I established nurturing routines, reduced work to reasonable hours, and learned to find joy in simple luxuries like cooking in my own kitchen. My academic performance rebounded as my situation stabilized. Professors who'd noted my decline commented on renewed engagement. I discovered a passion for nonprofit management, envisioning a career balancing financial success with social impact. Graduation day was a triumph I'd once feared might never come. Marcus sat proudly as I crossed the stage to receive my diploma with honors. In that moment, I felt Dad's presence strongly, his dream for my education finally fulfilled. Today, 3 years after Marcus found me at that diner, my life is unrecognizable from my darkest days. I work for a foundation addressing youth homelessness, understanding their struggles in ways most cannot. I own a beautiful apartment in a city I love. I have meaningful relationships with people who know my story and love me anyway. And I have a relationship with Marcus that has enriched both our lives immeasurably. The pain hasn't disappeared entirely. I still have moments of grief for my parents and flashes of anger at Victoria's betrayal. But these emotional echoes no longer control my life. They're simply part of a story that shaped but doesn't limit me. If you're facing your own impossible situation, please know that circumstances can change in ways you cannot imagine. The person who might help could be someone you haven't spoken to in years. The strength you need might come from resources you don't yet recognize. My story reminds me that family is defined by love and loyalty, not blood or legal ties. Marcus became more family to me than Victoria ever was. I learned the value of asking for help. Accepting assistance didn't diminish my strength but multiplied it. Most importantly, I learned that resilience isn't about weathering hardship alone, but finding ways to keep moving forward despite obstacles. Sometimes that means sleeping in your car. Sometimes it means accepting help from a long-lost uncle. The strength isn't in the specific strategy, but in the refusal to surrender to circumstances. Your story is still being written, and the next chapter might be better than you can imagine.